Welcome. My name is Andy Ingall, and I lead virtual public programs here at Reimagine. Just a few words first about Reimagine. We're a nonprofit organization catalyzing a uniquely powerful community. A powerful community that I hope we can emulate in some way that the Asheville community did for Ethan. This is a group of people of different backgrounds, different ages, different races, different sexual orientations, gender identities, all different kinds of faith that we saw so beautifully depicted in this film, and people of no faith. We're all coming together to heal ourselves, our communities, and the world. We support each other in facing adversity, loss, and mortality, and try to transform life's biggest challenges into action and growth. And we're so honored to be co-hosting this event with You Are Going to Die and the Center for Conscious Living and Dying. It was 2 years ago that Aditi, Sethi, and Hannah Fowler at the Center for Conscious Living and Dying, CCLD, offered the Reimagine community a sneak peek at this film. And this is my first time seeing it, and I'm just completely blown away. Thank you for this gift. I'm going to hand this over now to my colleague, Ned Buskirk, who is the executive director and founder of YG2D. He's going to say a few words and kick off the conversation with Scott Kirschenbaum, who is here with us, the film's director, and Aditi Sethi. Aditi is the founder of the Center for Conscious Living and Dying. Both she and Ned are longtime Reimagine collaborators. Ned and I will be in conversation with Aditi and Scott for around, 25 to 30 minutes. We would love for all of you to participate too. So please start populating the chat with your questions. We'll get to those. And Ned, I'm passing it to you.
Thanks so much, Andy. Hello, everybody. Just feeling very honored, and I'm glad I had a few minutes before we let all of you in to just sob almost uncontrollably. I haven't watched the movie until today, and I'm feeling, obviously, like many of you, so much. And so I do want to take a moment for all of us who shared this sacred experience of togetherness watching this movie to kind of catch our breath for a moment. I wonder about this time together as less a Q&A and more a way to really honor and be with what it means to hold our dying in community, and that perhaps all of you who said yes to Aditi and Scott and Ethan and his mother and his father and all these people we just spent this hour or so with, that we all say yes to kind of dying, this dying in community, even here. And so I invite you into this time with Aditi and Scott as a way of continuing that work, and to know that your questions and curiosities may be led by them and what we just witnessed, and especially how it may have cracked you open into an experience of vulnerability, which gives us a chance to be with some shared truths that might draw us closer together, you know? So I won't say more than, hi, I'm Ned, the executive director of YG2D, which is an acronym for You're Going to Die. I won't say more than that. I won't say more about what I do than that. Usually it might include me crying a great deal with community in these meaningful contexts. And I think a link to You're Going to Die is in the chat, and feel free to check all that out and reimagine and everything that we're offering in this conversation about mortality and death and loss and dying and grief, but also joy and community and connectivity and belonging and ecstasy, maybe too. So, um, so as Andy said, the chat is a good space for any of you here who have questions. You know, it might even be acknowledgments you want to share in this space. That you use the chat to type up stuff that you're really sitting with now. And it may be that you want to name something that Aditi and Scott could speak to. You know, it's like we don't have to say, here's the very clear question. It could be the, oh my gosh, I'm feeling this, and that we get a chance to have the community say, oh yes, I understand. And maybe Aditi and Scott can say, well, here's what I connect to that. But I'll ask real quick a question I'm feeling deeply, and that is with you, Aditi and Scott. I've been wondering a lot about, like, with your life since Ethan's death. What is it that you've taken from Ethan, maybe especially in this experience, into other loss and grief and death and dying in your life since Ethan died? And maybe we could just start there. And thank you for this time.
Yeah, thank you. Aditi, you want me to start or you want to start? Okay. I feel like I can set you up. Well, I went from the place of having a profound fear of death, a debilitating, paralyzing fear of death, to just this point now where I see this groundswell of enthusiasm for conscious dying and for Aditi's work with the Center for Conscious Living and Dying in Asheville. And it's just been incredibly remarkable. I would have never picked out this film. It's just, I was on the other side of the country and I got a call from Aditi, and she just asked me if I would speak to this young man, Ethan. And I will mention that Ethan's mom, Linda, is on this call as well. So we can bring her in for a cameo at some point in time. And within a minute, Ethan asked me if I'd film his death. And though I had that fear, I had, I'm similar in age and I also grew up Jewish. I just couldn't say no because he has that unsung mensch quality. So I would never have imagined that 3 years later, I'd be attending events now in public or at, major universities or conferences where everyone wanted to sit in amphitheaters and, opera houses and talk about conscious dying. It's remarkable. And I obviously I can see that Aditi's the perfect sort of figurehead and thought leader for this movement. I mean, we're seeing it in Asheville with the community death care effort here. So with that, I'd probably hand it over to Aditi to pick it up and share where you're at now. Because yes.
Oh boy.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you so much. And your presence, just to say, like, it's a whole other question I'm sure people are all feeling. There's, like, your presence behind the camera, your presence, in the work of capturing this story. Boy, felt a lot about that too, so powerful. So thank you. I'm so glad to be with you. Aditi, yes.
I've already forgotten the question, but I'll
Well, it's funny. I've been thinking about you specifically with this question. It's just the things that you've lived through since Ethan's death. And I don't need to go into the details unless you want to, but just wondering about what you've taken from Ethan into maybe some of what life has unfolded since then. Yeah.
yeah. Ethan's whole life prepared him for this moment that was captured in the 2 weeks leading up to his final breath. And the gift that he gave us and gives us, it just keeps on giving, in that he was willing to be so vulnerable and so honest and so raw and share this really mysterious journey that we will all take. And I am eternally grateful for him and for Scott for really capturing the intimacy of the experience for all of us. And I have to say the ripple effect, it just keeps going. You know, I had the privilege of and the honor of taking care of my father in his final days. And I don't know if I could have done it. This was just in July. He crossed over July 29th. And I don't know how I would have done it without the community that rallied around me and my family. And that was the Center for Conscious Living and Dying. Little did I know that caring for Ethan would lead to the ultimate support for me and my family in the deepest of ways. And having done this work for so long, nothing prepares you. I mean, even all the trained people are like, oh, you must have known what you were getting into, and it must have been easier because you've been around death. And I, absolutely not. In those moments with my father, I was his daughter. You know, Linda was his mother. And it was just, it's just so profound in that he gifted us this deep dive into an experience that very few allow us to witness. So it's changed my life and my relationship to death of my most beloved. So, yeah.
Aditi, we're in the midst of a theme this month at Reimagine on anticipatory grief, the kind of grief that caregivers experience. And we had last week a dancer, a choreographer, who led us in movement in a workshop. And she talked about the duality of emotions and experiences that one has when you're expecting a loss. She talked about living with sorrow and joy. She talked about living with absence and presence. She talked about living with loss and love. And she compared the experience of that anticipatory grief as if one is time traveling. You reflect on the past, you're staying in the present, and we know about Ethan was all about presence. And you also envision the future. You're shuffling across the multiverse. And Aditi, I'm curious if that resonates with you, if that's something that you experience in the process of being a doula.
A beautiful description of the paradox. You know, paradoxes of this life and this journey of life and death, and holding both in each moment, each breath, you know, the inhale and the exhale. I find that time stands still at the bedside. When, as a doula, there's a little bit of, unless you're doulaing a family member or someone you have a tremendous history with, you know, then yes, I have experienced this timelessness and this kind of navigation between different realms, you know, and almost like the past and present is here now in this moment. And so, yes, I totally relate to that. As a doula who doesn't have a history with a person, sometimes there is a feeling of just everything standing still. And in the interactions, I can sort of feel into their past and the present, but not so much their future self. Who knows where they're going to be, what they're going to merge with, who they're going to become, you know? But that is the duality, you know, I tend to hold both realities simultaneously. So it's all kind of one experience of love and joy simultaneously, you know? And that's definitely been my experience of grief, even in the wake of, those of you who might know, I live in Asheville, and Hurricane Helene has deeply impacted our communities, our region, rocked our world, if you will. And with the devastation, there's so much joy amidst the sorrow. And so it's here for all of us, and we all know at some point we're going to face this reality. It's almost hard to fathom. The mind can't comprehend. I still can't believe my father's not here in the physical. My mom is grieving and with such despair and loss. And it's just, yeah, how do you continue? So that anticipatory grief is real and something to be with. And also, again, using the tools that we have, mindfulness practice, presence practice, just deep meditation, whatever works for you to center yourself and to connect with something greater than this physical reality, you know? Yeah.
Thank you. Beautiful, Aditi. Thank you so much. I'm going into the chat here, so just a reminder, if anybody has questions to ask, I'm going up to the top from Shari or Sherry. Beautiful, important movie. Am I right to think that if medical aid in dying was legal in North Carolina, Ethan would still choose VSED so he could be present for all the stages of dying? If you wouldn't mind, Aditi, kind of explaining maybe a little briefly your understanding for all of us of medical aid in dying for anyone that might need it, and the VSED too. Not that you have to educate us, but just to give us a little bit of context.
A little bit. So the request to hasten death is a common one for people who like autonomy and who like to want to have agency and don't want to wait for the disease to take hold and have to endure all that comes with an illness. And options currently are medical aid in dying in about 11 states. And that's an option that exists in states like Washington, Oregon, Vermont now, where a physician would write an order for a cocktail, they call it a medication regimen. It's like 3-4 drugs, high doses of medications to hasten your death. And it requires that there are certain guidelines and requirements to access it, and you have to be able to ingest the medicine on your own. And that is something that is not legal in North Carolina. But there is something called voluntarily stopping eating and drinking, VSED, which has been going on for centuries. In Jainism, for instance, people have been fasting once their body can no longer serve their spirit. When you're so debilitated that you can't really enjoy and have a meaningful life, enjoy life and having meaningful quality of life, people fast and leave their bodies that way. And you do die by dehydration and no eating and drinking at all, complete cessation. So just to be clear, Ethan did not choose VSED. He physically lost the ability to swallow. And I still remember when he came to our inpatient hospice, he moved from Charlotte to Asheville, which is about a 2-hour drive. He commuted and he came in an ambulance. He asked for some kombucha, and we all knew he would aspirate. He would cough if he had anything to drink, but he insisted he just wanted a taste. So we put a drop on his tongue, and he started coughing, like violently almost. And so that was the end of his intake of fluid and water. So he physically could not swallow because of the tumor burden. So my sense is if he had the option of medical aid in dying, he wouldn't have taken it. He lived his whole life, and Linda can speak to this more, so connected to nature, so connected to his body. As you saw, he was a yogi and a Thai masseuse and just so embodied that I think, and he loved community. I think he would want to let nature take its course like he did. That's my sense.
Linda, I want to bring you into the conversation. That's okay with you. Welcome. So honored for you to be here. There's this Jewish concept that there are 36 tzaddikim, 36 righteous people who are holding up the universe. And I feel at that moment, when Ethan passed, he was one of them, and he passed it to someone else. And I'm just curious what you're continuing to learn from Ethan.
Thank you for being here tonight. Aditi, my heart, I love you. And Scott, I couldn't have asked for a more beautiful way for Ethan to pass. I'm just so grateful every day. Me and Ethan are connected. Every day we talk. I'm like really still crying tonight. My heart is broken, but I'm seeing all the beauty he did in the world. Last week, somebody from Memphis, a musician, messaged me. Ethan helped him so much, and he was just thinking of me. this is 3 years later. That's what's pulling me through, all the people he's touched. And Ethan was always like this when he was little. I've told this story where he's taken in a homeless person for a month while he was in college. That's who he was. When he was little, he'd pick up garbage from the street. He's just incredible. He was always there for anybody, no matter what he was going through. I'm grateful he's my son, but I miss him to death here. And Scott, I mean, how many times did I see this film already? It's got to be over 10. You did it so beautifully and you touched everything, but you didn't put it in my matzo bread that I made you on Passover.
Uh,
I'm just so great. I mean, like, how would I have survived this without this community? My family was in New York and it was during COVID, and my oldest son only got to come down. So this was my family. It still is. I mean, I'm forever grateful.
Thank you, Linda.
Aditi, what could I say about you? What could I say, darling? My heart goes to you and everybody in Asheville. And without all these teachings and this community, how could anybody survive? I took a grief training with David Kessler. I don't know if anybody knows him. So I got certified to, counsel people, but I still can't bring myself to do it. But watching the film tonight, I think I'm ready to do it. It's like I just want to help people right now. It's been really hard, but I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm definitely ready. Thank you all for being here. It means so much to me to know people are still interested in this, and it's changing the way we look at death. Everybody that's seen it has told me that it's changed. So thank you, Aditi, Scott, and all of you that are doing the work.
Thank you, Linda. What a special thing to be with you after watching this film and being with your emotion and the unimaginable loss, of your son, and to know you've watched this movie that many times and that you're pushing forward to into, and I just respect the like all in good time, but just to say to go into the grief conversation more out of this, I very much relate to that. I wouldn't be here if not for my own losses that somehow directed me right to this place, like literally. So thank you, Linda, and for your son and for what he offers in our lives. But you ended with that comment of like the being and the dying, the new ways we can be together. And I'm seeing Chelsea's question in here. I'm going to throw this your way, Scott, because I think it's really, I'm wondering about your experience before the movie. You said like you wouldn't have usually picked a movie like this. So I'll read Chelsea's question here for you. And if you wouldn't mind, you can be the first to answer this. But she said, if you had a magic wand and could change anything about the dying process as it is today, either creating something new or removing something that is currently in play, what would you change?
It's an amazing question, because when I showed up, I flew cross country on a red eye. I got, we were like trying to bring a production team together on the fly, calling random people, got there, and I saw the way that Aditi held the space at Ethan's bedside. And I just realized that that is where you're crossing the threshold, is when you come to the bedside, you're actually entering the space of self-love and respect and like just deep intimacy. And for me, that I grew up, I saw, the atrocities and all these other images, but there was all this fear-based language around death instead of the sense that we can have an assets-based or an affirming approach to the bedside. And so, this is why, having the privilege of being with Aditi, I realized, I had the fear, but I knew that if I followed her energetic lead, and if the team was able to just like it's a place, I think, Andy, you mentioned this dancer choreographer who spoke about anticipatory grief. There is dance, there is just like elegance in how people move around the bedside. And so my hope would, I love theater, I love art. I just would love that we can celebrate getting to be there. It's an honor and privilege. I mean, I was just hearing Brent from the film. I saw him a few days ago, and he was talking about what it was like. He just sat with someone who passed at the Center for Conscious Living and Dying. I think his gentleman, I mean, if it's okay to say his name, Aditi, is it Chris? Is that okay to say or no? Well, I just said it, so I'm sorry. I hope so. Just like Brent was just saying, how much of an honor it was to be the last person there with him on his volunteer shift. And so I don't know, I think that having that sense of being like embodied around the bedside instead of full of, I mean, I don't know. That's just my own sense of it, is like there's a excitement now knowing that I can participate in these conversations.
Thank you, Scott. My gosh. Yeah. I mean, I feel your dance too in the filming. I just really do. And the attention to breath. And I'm just like, we probably could talk for hours, all of us here, about the decisions you made and how you captured what you just described, so well, and let us in to that dance. Thank you. Aditi, did you want to offer some thoughts on that question from Chelsea?
Yeah. I think somewhere along the way, human beings have forgotten that we are not separate from nature. We're a part of nature. And I feel like if anything that we could return to the remembrance of, it's that. Death is all around us. Death is everywhere. And Hurricane Helene has shown us that nature is so powerful and we are not separate. And so I think that's where I think if we could remember that, then there may be less fear around this process and less avoidance of it and less denial of it, which then leads to lack of exposure to it, which perpetuates the fear and the lack of preparation. And so, yeah, I would say that piece is what's come to me lately.
Thank you, Aditi.
Folks, if you have a burning question, please ask it now. In the meantime, I just wanted to make one more announcement before we take off. I'm hoping all of you had a profound experience, and I hope you'll keep coming to Reimagine events. I hope you'll tune into the You're Going to Die podcast and go to their events. I hope you'll learn more about the Center for Conscious Living and Dying. I would love for you all to complete a survey. This is going to help us improve the programs we do at Reimagine. So my colleague Nicole Tan is going to paste that link in the chat. We want to hear from you, and we want to get better. So thank you. And I hope you'll be able to come to the final session of our anticipatory grief series, as well as other events on Reimagine's schedule. This Wednesday, we've got grief expert and author Claire Bidwell Smith, and death doula, writer, and filmmaker Darnell Lamont Walker. They're going to offer some reflections on the small, sweet steps that we can take to transform our grief into action. I want to thank you, Aditi, Scott, Ned, Linda, for leading us in this discussion. For us, this is all about legacy, and I'm seeing it here with all of these teachers in the room. Ethan was a wonderful teacher, so thank you for continuing that. And I hope to see all of you soon. Thank you for this gift, Scott and Aditi. And I want to wish everyone a good night. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you,
Thank you
Scott.
so
Aditi, so good to be with you. Linda, what an honor. All of you, what a special thing to watch this movie and then get this time. Thank you, everybody.